if you required a student to do something that lended itself to the development of character? Can you imagine? And that there was featured, built in, required reflection and so forth. And then, of course, we would like these experiences, all of them, to be educationally purposeful. We talked a bit about this last night, measuring what we value. And I won't belabor the point, but the big scale assessment activities now are oblivious to character development, or however we might really define that constellation. And there's this huge project going on globally. It's likely to get funded by OECD, this assessment of higher education learning outcomes. There are 11 or 12 countries now that have bought into this, and the CLAs, those of us who know the collegiate learning assessment, is a feature of it. And there'll be a context strand, the kinds of things that Sandy and Chick and Nessie have been asking for years. But right now, there is no place to measure the kinds of things we're talking about in there. What I'm suggesting is there's little interest on the part of the major funders. And so some of us are going to have to kind of lean into that wheel. So what did I say here? You know, Sandy said we measure, well, I can't remember which side you took last night, but you took both sides, of course, as you always do. We measure what we value, or we value what we measure. And my point about the valuing what we measure is if you end up with a number, that's what you end up reporting, and whether you want it or not, people are going to say that must be what you're for or about, right? And so for us to be for and about something akin to character development, we're going to need data in multiple forms. You know, here we're talking about these so-called quantitative, sometimes slippery indicators, and there are other ways to get at this stuff. There are lots of tools out there. I'm going to drive us down to the bottom because I think some of our best work is going to be best represented in electronic portfolios. And now AAC&U has got this set of 15 rubrics. And I'm going to be finished here in a minute. And I'm sure you can read this in the back. This is the rubric for ethical reasoning. And you can go to the AAC&U website and have a look at this. These were people from a number of different colleges and universities across the country. Thinking about and saying, if we developed so-called standards, we're talking here about a way of looking at student performance. You know, what's kind of the lowest level you'd expect out of a student in terms of their ability to talk about their core beliefs, or stating a position. They can state a position, but they can't state what someone might object to in terms of how they think. From the baseline here all the way up to what they call a capstone or a higher level. We don't have time to talk about this now, but I would invite you, we're going to leave this PowerPoint here. I'd invite you to go to the AAC&U website. How's that? Am I doing a good job for AAC&U? And you know, this is one of 15 rubrics that they have marshaled the development of. Again, they didn't just make them up sitting in DC. They had faculty and staff from around the country working on these things. So there are ways that I think we can be more intentional, somewhat more sophisticated, and perhaps more persuasive in how we're working with students. People say they want this. They apparently aren't willing to pay for it, or they aren't willing to take a stand about it. So this is the wither part. I mean, I don't know where we're going to go, but I'm pretty convinced that if we aren't doing it from inside our institutions, and if we aren't getting foundation support for it, I don't think we're going to see someone else riding in on the big white, or whatever it is, stallion helping us here. It's going to have to be done, I'm afraid, from the inside out. But I think, as I tried to articulate last night, I think there are ways we can link our inside-out arguments to the outside world and perhaps get a better hearing both inside and outside. So, you know, make a list, do an inventory. If it's not happening at your campus to the extent you want, my guess is it's because students either don't have the venues for them, or you haven't introduced them, or the academic advisors aren't pushing them, or we haven't done things with the peer culture, you know, which John Dalton's been talking about for 20 and 30 years. I've tried to coin a term here, character-inducing program. Anyway. It's almost lunchtime. We have, I guess, or are we out of time? Have I gone over? No. Wow, I was stunned into silence. Maybe we should go directly to the cartoons then. Comment, question?
From a state perspective and thinking about policy, can you just give one or two things that you think a state system or the coordinating board for our state should be thinking about before in its colleges? And the other side of it is the institutions are saying there's so little state support. You don't have any leverage here with us to make us do these things. But what would you recommend?
I don't know what I would recommend, other than looking for a partner from the business roundtable to come in to, I mean, I don't have a solution to this, but unless you capture the outside-in pressure on state systems, I don't think we're going to be able to get them from the language I'm using inside out. I mean, we can talk to her blue in the face. So I do think we need partners from government and the private sector to say, these are things that, we're looking for, not to belabor this point, but business and industry are, as a group, satisfied with what students know about what they studied. Most of the things they're dissatisfied with are things that they will have to reteach or do better by. And I think this is an area, just like students say, the character development stuff is, I should have gotten this before I got to college. And I think that may be the hardest sell, both inside the academy to our colleagues, as well as the state systems. Again, what is the role of the university in this domain? So I think we're going to need a louder voice with a bigger club to get that attention. Yep.
Can I ask the group something? I'm curious. How many folks, you could do a show of hands, have some sort of high-impact practices on their own campuses right now that students are participating in? High-impact practices, service learning or community-based work, volunteering, undergraduate research. How many make them required for all students? Okay, so look around and see where some campuses are doing that. And my next question is, how many for you are your campuses undergoing, or in the next 5 years, maybe undergoing general education reform? That's usually a perennial thing. Somebody, at some point, somewhere is going under general reform. Some of the campuses in our project that have taken heed to what George has said about the high-impact practices have moved from strictly distribution models to really working student affairs and academic affairs together to put in dedicated courses that all, a common core that all students take while still offering distribution options, so that it's not one or the other, it's a mixed model. And they're finding that a really effective way to say, okay, let's have an early experience where you get introduced to some of these things, let's have you practice some of this, maybe in a community setting, and let's have you reflect on it in a culminating way in your senior year. And we'll be learning what the results are of those kinds of things as we get better at assessment. But
I have some other thoughts about state policy. It has to do with really what you report to states, if there's a reporting system. And if you start reporting some of this stuff, you might actually get someone's attention who wasn't thinking about it. Yeah. And that may be a 3 or 4 year. Yes? You should tell us who you are.
When you are saying government and state should demand institutions to keep their character development, are you basing that on the assumption that we don't understand what that is?
Will you think less of me if I say yes? Or, well, demand.
The problem is you can't demand what you don't know. You can't teach what is unclear.
You can't teach what you what?
What is unclear?
What's unclear?
Character development. What is it?
Well, I don't think, I mean, I can tell you what I think it is. And I don't think we're ever going to get agreement across 50 states about if they ever got interested in it. I think we're a long way from states and businesses demanding it. What I'm saying is if we expect to get some support for doing it, we're going to need some louder, more influential voices to do it. I mean, this is your call, not mine. And so I think each institution is going to define it for itself. It's going to pick the kind of measures that it says are reasonable representations. And when, I don't know that I ever said teach character development. I think I said induce it. And by that I mean there are lots of other ways, probably more powerful ways. I mean, I'm not advocating a character development course or two in the curriculum. I'm saying we should be providing students with opportunities to test their mettle, so to speak. We should be pushing them to declare what they think is important.